Well, hey there, welcome to 2017. This is Joe Van Cleve. Welcome to a cloudy, rainy, gloomy January 1st in Albuquerque. It's the old Northern Hemisphere winter. And yeah, we've had a lot of rain this December and now going into January. And I thought it would be a good time for us to do a little talk. You know, 2016 was a fantastic year for this YouTube channel, and it was all because of you guys. I started out at the end of 2015 with maybe 100 and something subscribers, and now I have like 920 or something like that. So I gotta say, first of all, that I really appreciate every one of you guys that watch, and I say that sincerely because you might be aware, if you're a regular YouTube viewer, you might know that I haven't monetized this channel, and so every time you hear somebody on a YouTube video say thank you for watching, it's hard to take them sincerely, because what they're really saying is I make more money if you click on the subscribe button. Well, I'm not asking you to do that, and I don't have any plans in the immediate future to monetize this channel, but I'm just sincerely saying I really thank you for the dialogue that we've had through my videos and your comments and emails, and so I really appreciate that. You know, I started out making videos a couple years ago with the idea of just covering some of my photography work, especially pinhole cameras, box cameras, paper negatives, camera building projects, and that kind of thing. And I had made a handful of videos over a period of a couple years. For some reason, they gained enough interest, and I started to see that there was a number of people who were constantly inquiring about this kind of stuff and were curious about it, and I thought, well, you know, I could probably do more of this, see where it goes. And I've continued to do some of that. And now, this last year, 2016, what really happened on this channel was I had this crazy idea that because I had been a typewriter blogger for about a decade, since 2006 actually, and that I have a small collection of typewriters, and by small I mean maybe only a dozen, which to actual typewriter collectors that's not much, but because I had an ongoing collection of typewriters, I thought, you know, there's enough people out there that are curious about manual typewriters that don't know very much about them, then maybe I could start a little video series about typewriters. And I certainly wasn't the first person to do videos on typewriters. There's a whole bunch of videos out there if you just search, but I just decided, okay, I'll just do my own little take on it. And my intention with the typewriter video series has been more about informing people about typewriters who are really unfamiliar with typewriters, who want to get into them, maybe have a curiosity about it. My whole intention is sort of to enable people to use them and make them tools for their creative life. And so, you know, we're coming up on episode 50 of the typewriter video series. That's right, the next episode will be 50, and the thing I'm curious about is there like a golden anniversary for 50 videos in a series? What do you do? I don't have a gold colored typewriter, so we're just gonna have to wing it, I guess. And then after I started the typewriter video series and I started having fun with it, then I got the idea that because one of my other interests was, you know, office supply stuff. I had been an office supply junkie ever since I was a kid, right? And I love pens and paper and all that stuff. So I had this other idea, let's go start the Confessions of an Office Supply Junkie series. And you know, I've maybe put out maybe a dozen videos on that series, and I'm actually overdue for another one. I'll try to get one out this week. But that was fun. What was fun about it was a kind of an alternative personality, if you will. I'm kind of like playing with the inner motivation of why I like office supply stuff, sort of joking around with the idea that maybe it's an addiction or whatever, which it probably is. There's some part of that. It's probably true. But it was fun. It's fun to kind of play a character You know, not really a character like, you know, a full-blown fictional character, but kind of, you know, there's a little bit of a character in all of us, I think. Anyways, and then more recently, I started this other little series that I'm not really calling a series. I'm really calling like part 1, part 2, and part 3. But it's about the abacus. Totally different subject matter from photography or typewriters or office supply stuff. But it's an interest that I've had since childhood, and I know there is a large amount of interest in that subject in educational circles and in a lot of countries around the world. So I thought, well, there could be an audience for that. But my interest in doing all this isn't really about gaining an audience as much as it is really about sharing what I'm interested in with other people. So I don't really know in this coming year, which has already happened, it's came here, it's 2017. I don't know how much longer I'll do the typewriter series. Oh, now what I mean by that is I want to do it as long as I can. But first of all, oftentimes I'm talking about typewriters in my collection. I only have 12 or 13 of them. And occasionally I'll sell one and then I'll maybe get another one. But my collection doesn't really change all that often. And secondarily, I haven't covered subject matter like full-size upright typewriters from early 20th century, mainly because I don't have any in my collection and I'm not familiar with them. So there are a lot of things I haven't really covered, but I probably won't because I don't have the machines to show you. And there's other things like I'm an amateur in repairing typewriters. I've learned a little bit, but I'm not a professional, so I won't be able to tear down a typewriter to the last screw, nut, and bolt and tell you how to do it. And I'm sure there are a lot of professionals out there who have that skill, and some of them have YouTube channels, but few of them are willing to share all their secrets because they're professionals and, you know, they have a professional interest to protect their knowledge and trade. But I do want to continue the typewriter series as long as I can, and I think it's going to be about continuing to talk about how typewriters, how we interact with them as users of typewriters, as writers, amateur writers, if you will, and just the whole typewriter lifestyle. I'll keep talking about it as much as I can. I don't want to make it boring. I don't want to make it old. And there may be a time comes when I won't be able to put out as many videos on the subject, but I'll try to keep it going as long as I can. I've never put a limitation on my on that series in terms of a number of videos or whatever. Similarly with photography and camera making and all this stuff, I don't foresee limiting myself. I see continuing to do that, but it's all based on being able to have the time and energy to do new projects, because, you know, I can't really share anything unless I've actually done it. And to do a project, whether it's a camera making project or investigating some new kind of exposure methods or whatever, developing processes, that actually has to happen. You have to actually do that before you can show it on video. And so the time it takes to do that takes away from the time that I would make videos. So, you know, it's a matter of balancing one's priorities about time. Well, next I'd like to talk a little bit about the man behind the curtain, to use a Wizard of Oz reference. And really what I'm referring to is the whole business of making videos, the process of it. Not everything, but just a little bit about how I do it. This I'm covering only because a lot of YouTube viewers are also interested in making videos, and so maybe the technical ins and outs of how people do it might interest you. I do it a little bit differently than a lot of other people, I'm sure, and there's some things I do that you might say, why are you doing it that way, you know? When I started 2016, I was shooting videos mainly with a Panasonic Lumix G5. Now, to explain this, I have to go back into the history of my digital photography background. I think my first digital camera was a Sony little point-and-shoot style video camera with a, you know, built-in zoom lens kind of a thing. I don't remember the model number. I think it had a 90 in it, something 90, a little point-and-shoot thingy. Mid-2000s. marginal quality. But my first real interchangeable lens digital camera was the Lumix G1, and the Panasonic Lumix G1 came out in the fall of 2008. It was the camera that started the mirrorless revolution. It was the first Micro Four Thirds camera. It came out about 6 months before the first Olympus pen, years before the first Sony or Fuji X. So we're talking the early days of mirrorless cameras, the Panasonic G series. So after a number of years with the G1, which didn't shoot video, I got a G5. And I've been shooting the G5 for a number of years. Now the G5 isn't really ideally suited to video, mainly because it doesn't have external mic jacks. And so I was always having to deal with onboard microphones, which are the two microphones right in front of the hot shoe. I compensated for that a little bit by building a little reflector thing that would slip onto the hot shoe, and kind of a piece of metal that would kind of bounce the sound from in front of the camera down onto the microphones. And that worked marginally okay. I also started experimenting with a digital audio field recorder to record my sound, and then I would have to go through some different things in order to get that into my video editing system, which I will talk about in a little bit. But I used this camera for shooting video up until somewhere in the middle of this last year, 2016. And then I got a Panasonic Lumix GH3, and that's what we're shooting with right now. GH3 is just a little bit bigger. It's a Micro Four Thirds. Has just a bit bigger of a grip and slightly taller, but it has external mic jacks, headphone jack, a manual video exposure mode, and it shoots a higher codec of .mov movie. It's like an 80-something megabyte per second bit stream, so it shoots a much higher, I think it's like 422 quality video. It's not 4K. It was the premier 1080p Panasonic Lumix camera, video camera, and I got it used from KEH Camera. Paid maybe $300 or something for a excellent condition. Looks brand new. So that's the camera I've been shooting. Occasionally I'll shoot video on this as well. Now as far as lenses, so for almost all of my videos had been shot on this lens. This is the very first Micro Four Thirds lens. This is the Panasonic Lumix 14-45. It's an f3.5 to 4.7 or maybe 5.6. 3.5 to 5.6. 14-45 is in full frame angle of view. It's equivalent to a 28-90. So it's a pretty darn good lens. Panasonic did a really good thing for the first Micro Four Thirds lens. It still holds up pretty well. The autofocus is maybe not quite as fast as some of the professional line of Lumix G lenses, and it doesn't have as fast of an aperture as you might want for low light, but it's a pretty darn good lens. But because of the videos that are shot at close distances, you kind of need a wide-angle lens, and of course this is equivalent to a 28, fairly wide angle, but it's kind of big. It's a zoom lens and it's not as fast, and so what we're shooting with now is a lens that I got a couple months ago, and this is the Panasonic Lumix 14mm f2.5 version 2. It's about the same size physically as the 20mm 1.7 pancake lens, which is on the G5. So it's essentially about the same size lens as this. That's what we're shooting with now. And but it focuses much faster than the 20. It's better than the version 1 of the 14. And because it's equivalent to a 28mm angle of view, it's essentially it's the video lens I use all the time, because I'm generally shooting this kind of an angle of view anyways. So that's the lens I'm using. Under normal lighting conditions, I usually use this lens around f5.6, but just a few minutes ago when we were out in the man cave shed, I opened up the lens down to about f2.5 just to get a little bit of light, because it's a gloomy, cloudy, rainy morning out there, and I didn't have the shed plugged in, so no lights inside the shed. But anyways, so I have a faster lens, 28mm equivalent angle of view. There's a couple other video devices that I also used intermittently throughout the year in some of my videos. You may or may not have noticed. One of those was the Fujifilm X10. This was their first tiny little X camera, built-in zoom lens. It shoots video, 1080p video. The thing about it though is it doesn't have a flip out screen, so you're basically composing blind if you're in front of the camera. The X10 has an optical viewfinder coupled to the lens, as well as an LCD screen. But on this particular camera, the optical viewfinder broke. The linkage mechanism between the focusing and this broke a couple years ago. So I picked up an external Olympus Micro Four Thirds optical viewfinder, and I put on a hot shoe. But I discovered that if you put something black behind the viewfinder, the front lens of the hot shoe mounted viewfinder acts like a convex mirror, and you can actually line up your shot by looking at your reflection in that viewfinder as a mirror. It's kind of like a, I don't know if you can see the camera, but anyways, so that's how I was framing up my shots. I did use this for a number of videos, but in doing some careful comparisons in quality between the video of this, the video of the G5, and the video of the GH3, obviously the GH3 had better quality video, so I quit using this. I also used, for several videos, I used an old flip video camera. I have 2 flip video cameras. I love the convenience of them, but you know, the video quality is only marginal. I used them for a little bit, but now let's talk about the other side of the video production, which is the editing side. Okay, so when you're a YouTube video maker, you're supposed to use a modern computer with a modern video editing software, and probably a Mac, and probably Adobe Premiere or something like that. No. Yours truly does not use that. So I was using the first, up until early this year, my video editing platform was an old iPad 2, not the iPad Air 2, the iPad 2, the old iPad 2. This is the 16 gig version, which means you only have about maybe 9 or 10 gigabytes of free memory available for all your files. So that worked okay for me for videos that were under 20 minutes with the video footage shot from the G5 camera. But when I got the GH3, the higher quality codec, the larger, faster bit stream video coming out of the GH3 meant the files were much bigger. And the 16 gigabytes of memory, 9 or 10 practically speaking, of available memory wasn't enough. And so I wanted to replace it with another iOS device. I'm using iMovie in the iOS platform for my video editing, and I didn't want to spend the money at $500 or more for another iPad with a bigger memory size. Probably a 64 gig iPad would have cost me about maybe $600. I wasn't ready to spend that much money. But I found the iPod Touch. It's a little bit smaller than an iPhone. It's an iOS device, so it's essentially like an iPad. It has a 16:9 screen instead of a 4:3 screen, and it runs the latest version of iOS, and it has a newer version of iMovie. It has 32 gigs of memory instead of 16. This is what I do all my videos on. This is my video editing platform. And I have my little wood and brass little holder that I use it with. But what I'm doing is, you have the Panasonic Lumix cable that goes from the micro USB to full-size USB, and then you get the Apple adapter. It goes from USB to whatever the hell they call the latest Apple connector thingy. Anyways, these two cables plug between the Lumix GH3 and the iPod Touch, and I transfer the files that way from the camera to the iPod Touch. Now the GH3 has wireless file transfer, but if you've ever actually tried transferring about 5 or 10 gigabytes of video via wireless transfer, you're going to be there all day. So I recommend, if you're doing any kind of video editing to a portable device, use the cables, use your common sense. It's a lot faster. I mean, if you're doing JPEG still photos, yeah, you can do the wireless thing. But man, if you're shooting video, especially a camera like the GH3 that shoots a higher quality Kodak with larger files, you're going to need cables. So anyways, I transfer the files to this. I edit the movies in iMovie on this iPod Touch, and then when I'm done editing the movies, I will render the finalized version to the camera roll of the device, and then depending on how much memory I have left, I will delete all of the raw files off the device except for the final rendered version, and then I upload it to YouTube through the Safari browser. I think the main reason why I'm sharing with you the background of how I make these videos is because I have this philosophy that I really want to enable you guys to be able to do stuff that you might think is hard but really isn't. And so just like with pinhole photography or using Harman direct positive paper or using manual typewriters, once you learn some of the tricks to it, it becomes easy. I'm trying to enable people to find ways of being creative. The same way with video, I want to kind of show you that you don't have to spend thousands of dollars. There are alternatives. Instead of buying the $1,500 MacBook, you can buy the $300 iPod Touch and still use iMovie. Instead of buying the $2,000 Sony camera, you can buy the $600 Lumix camera and have great video. So there are alternatives out there, and I just want to encourage you guys to enable all of us to be more creative. Another thing that changed this year was the way that I shoot videos in terms of my, what you might call a set. I've done a lot of videos in my office, and actually we're in my office right now, and with my junky bookshelf background and all that, which you've seen on a lot of videos. And then I started shooting out in my garage, and we have a metal clothesline hung up diagonally in the garage, and I hung up a giant gray bed sheet and used that as a sort of a crude backdrop with lights on my workbench. And then a strange thing happened. It got cold and wintertime hit here in the Northern Hemisphere, and the garage gets cold, so I decided I needed to move my video studio to a warmer part of the house. So we're back in my office, which is a spare bedroom of my house. But what I've done is I've hung curtains on front of my closet doors, and now this is my new studio area. I'm using an old softbox type light off to this side, and here is the old Mini Apollo light modifier. It's like 25 years old, and the fabric has been burned over the years from using hot incandescent light bulbs in it, but now I'm using a cooler LED light bulb. And then I have these other two lights are metal reflector work lights that you get at hardware stores. They have fabric diffusers on the front of them, and I'm using daylight balanced LED bulbs as well. So here's an example of one of those work lights. Metal reflector with just a little squeeze kind of spring clamp. I have this one stuck on the shelf of my bookshelf. Yes, that's an old school picture of me. Don't laugh. And I'm using this porous landscaping fabric, and I have it attached with bulldog clips around the periphery of the work light so that it makes a diffused light source. I'm using a daylight balanced LED lamp, and then I have the other light clamped to the shelf of my bookshelf here so I can adjust. They both have these ball adjustments with a wing nut, so you can adjust it however you want to aim it. So everything is daylight balanced. I got 3 lights plus whatever light comes in through the west facing office window. But this is my new little studio setup that you might have noticed in the last few videos, so it is a lot more comfortable. you know, our house gets a little noisy because it's hardwood floors, and so you hear every little noise in the house. If a phone rings in the other side of the house, you'll hear it in the distance. If someone's talking loudly or has the TV going, you might hear it. So I usually wear a lavalier mic. Today I'm just using the hot shoe mounted Shure microphone with a dead cat on it. So you might hear a little bit of, the only room noise right now is the computer fan in my desktop box has a fan going. You might be able to hear that in the background. But anyway, that's the background, the man behind the curtains pulling the levers of the video production thing. I'm using an older camera. I'm using only 1080p video. I'm using homemade lights, homemade studio, and I'm editing it all down onto a little tiny little iPod Touch with iMovie. Oh, did I mention? I got a neat coffee maker for my office. Yeah, isn't that cool? Woohoo! So that's my little minimalist video editing setup. I hope to not have to monetize my channel this year. I'd rather not distract you guys with advertisements. I might end up doing that. It's not like I'm fully employed. I don't need the money necessarily, but I appreciate all of your viewership. I appreciate the fact that I can be an information channel for you guys, and I appreciate your feedback especially. So, continuing on into 2017, let's make it a great year, everybody. Until next time, you have yourselves a great day.